Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML.
News Talk 1270 KIML. Don Carpenter Show. And I want to welcome back to the program Scott Clem, running for House District 31. And it's been about 2 or 3 months since we last spoke.
That's correct, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always good. I mean, you even call it. You're a regular caller, so of course I couldn't turn you down when you wanted to come in to talk about your campaign. First off, and we'll get to, just for maybe we have some new listeners, we'll get to your background in a second, but how's the campaign coming along?
It's going great. I have a lot of support. It's been good to see some folks who've come up to me and said, "Hey, we want your signs." So I have a lot of signs in people's yards, which is wonderful, and that's really what I've tried to make my campaign about is going to folks, going door to door, and meeting folks that way. So I've been pleased, and so far the folks have been pleased as well.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few signs around town. So I think that grassroots approach is, and that's something that not a lot of folks do these days, and it's kind of an old-fashioned way of campaigning.
Yeah. I guess it could be old-fashioned. I guess it's just the best way that I know how. So.
Well, see, and I think that personal thing, and especially in a community like this, I think that personal thing is a good way to go about it.
Sure. I mean, well, that's what you're representing. You're representing the people. I don't have some big backer somewhere, I'm not, no business or anything like that is endorsing me. I'm just running on issues that people care about and bringing my message to them, and those are important issues to the people of Wyoming. Yeah.
Well, and why don't we, just for those that might not have caught you last time, just quickly go over your background, what you do and why you decided to do this.
You bet. I work at the Yes House. People know it here in Gillette. It's also known as Youth Emergency Services. It's a variety of programs. I work at a residential group home and have for some years now. In total, I've been there 8 years, and I case manage there at the group home. I love it. It's great. I work with ornery kids. They like me. At least they say so to my face. Sometimes they may say other things behind my back. It's fun working there because I'm in a wheelchair. I was hurt when I was 19 years old in a skiing accident. I was paralyzed, and I like to kid around a lot with them. And so a lot of these newer kids will come in and they'll say, "How'd you end up in a wheelchair?" And I'll tell them, I said, "Well, my wife stabbed me." And they said, "You're still with her?" And I said, "Well, I married her after she stabbed me." I said, "She stabbed me and then went to prison and got out and said that you're going to marry me." And I said, "Okay." And the kids believe it. They do. And I've had actually some fun experiences even with parents because the kids don't get it, and I kind of leave them hanging there. And usually some of the other kids will no, he wasn't really hurt that way. But I've had some that have kind of fell through, and parents were even questioning me like, you really work here, and looking at other folks like, you let him work here, his wife stabbed him, that kind of thing. But that's of course not true. So.
Well, yeah, and it was a skiing accident, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And you still ski?
I do, yeah.
You're crazy.
It's fun, a lot of fun. It's called mono skiing, and went to an event this last year. I've done it a couple times. This last year was a lot of fun because I really got the hang of it, really had my bearings, and so did some things that even I wasn't expecting myself to do. So it was a lot of fun. And that was just right over here in the local hills here, the Black Hills.
You certainly have more guts than I do. I mean, I've seen the mono skiing before, which is it's a pretty cool thing to do. You have more. Well, you're running for office, which is more guts than I would have in the first place. But what made you make the decision to actually throw your hat in the ring for this?
Sure. Well, like I said, I think the last time I was on your show, I had been considering running for office. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment when it comes to political things. It's just always been something I've been interested in. And more and more in local politics, and I actually thought I might go into city council, but what I found is the issues that I cared most about were state issues. in particular with things like education and the public lands issue, which we talked about before in your show, and some of the stuff that's even going on with the superintendent of public instruction taking away her powers, that kind of thing. So those are all issues that I really cared passionately about. And I thought, well, I'm going to do the thing that I care about. And so that's why I threw my hat in the ring as far as the state office.
Well, and the last time, I think we pretty much spent your entire visit talking about the public lands issue, which is fine. I mean, I that's one of my pet issues as well. But I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that really is important to the state. And you mentioned education, so why don't we start off with that? I mean, you work with kids, and obviously, education is an important issue. I mean, this Common Core stuff. I mean, every time education is brought up, Common Core is the first thing that people ask about.
Sure.
So why don't we talk about that first?
Well, Common Core is junk. And some of those educators out there are not going to like that, but it is. What it is a top-down for just regular folks that are listening. It's a top-down government. I don't want to say funded, but it's a government-promoted way of education. It's the socialization of education. That's really what it comes down to. And there's a lot of devious things behind Common Core, even such as how our state got Common Core. We were coerced into getting Common Core, and that goes back to the 2009 recession. It comes down to the what's called the race to the top funding that President Obama promoted out there. Well, in order to get this race to the top funding for education, your state had to adopt Common Core. If you didn't adopt Common Core, you couldn't qualify for the funds. And that's the same thing we've been talking about. It's been in the news a little bit, the waiver for No Child Left Behind. Well, in order for a state to get a waiver for No Child Left Behind, a state has to adopt Common Core. So they're saying it's a non-coerced thing, and it's not promoted by the government and all this kind of, we could call it BS, and that's exactly what it is, because the truth is we were coerced into getting Common Core. And there's just a lot of bad things with it. It really tells you what to teach, how to teach it, when to teach it. And that's not good for especially some of these kids who, let's take division, 5th grade division. You might have 5 different kids who learn division 5 different ways. But Common Core says this is the way they're going to learn it, and this is how they're going to learn it. And so it might appeal to one of those kids, but the other 4 are left shaking their heads going, what is going on? How are we doing this? And that frustrates parents. And of course, the whole idea behind local control, and this is what I try to bring it back to, is I believe that, first of all, I believe that education is accountable to parents. Any kind of parent, I think, would agree with that. Education shouldn't be held accountable as far as, I guess, different school boards, and they should be. There is some accountability there, but really what it comes down to is education is accountable to parents as far as what they teach and how they teach it.
The final say.
Exactly. A parent should be able to go into a school and demand an answer, and they should get one. Well, what happens with Common Core is it takes away from local control. It takes away from local control even within an own school district. That's why people say, well, Common Core isn't curriculum. Well, the whole idea is to push curriculum. Our school board has limited choices in the curriculum it can get now because they're all Common Core focused. And there's some other things that go along with this, privacy rights, and we can talk about that in a moment. But kind of staying honest, if a parent has an issue, they could go to the school, but the school's hands are tied. They can't do anything because Common Core says this is what we're doing and how we're doing it. And by the way, you can't change those standards. That's another important thing. Those Common Core state standards that we have, you can't change them. You can't amend them. A state has to adopt them as is. There's no deviation. Now, you had someone in here, I think it was a Democrat candidate for the superintendent of public instruction, and they're saying, well, there's 20% deviation. Well, no, that's not true. There's 15% that you can go above the standards, but you can't change the standards. The standards are as is, and there's no deviation from them. So, again, parent gets frustrated, goes to the school, but can't do anything. So the parent goes to the school board. Well, the school board their hands are tied as well. Well, who better to hold someone accountable if you have a problem than either your school that you're going to or to the local school board? I mean, those are the people that we elect. Well, the problem is it takes up power away from them and it aggregates it more to the top, and it's hard to hold people accountable when that power is aggregated toward the top, because then you have to, you're talking about national politics and things like that, and we know that that's hard to change. But local control, local politics, local people. That's easier to approach those people, and they're easier to hold accountable, and that's what I'm about.
Well, and I think one of the things you always hear as an argument in favor of Common Core is you have to have some kind of standards. And I don't think anyone's saying that you don't need standards, but these are the wrong ones.
Bingo. And what these are race to the middle standards. These everybody knows that competition produces excellence. I mean, we can see that out in the business world. People who are competing against each other, they find some niche in the economy, and they're gonna work that thing, and they do, and they're successful, and that's good. Well, the same thing could be true in the school arena. Competition produces excellence. What these Common Core state standards do, though, is it holds back excellence. It keeps everybody on the same page. It says this is what we're going to teach, when we're going to teach it, and this is what they're going to learn, and we're not going to really go anywhere else. Now, again, they say there's that 15% that you can go above and beyond, but that's it. So really what we're doing is that we're not allowing our students to excel. What we're doing is we're kind of keeping them all toward the middle. And really we're not even doing that because we're leaving a lot of them behind because we're not varying our education to meet the needs of those other students who have those needs. I mean, the teachers do what they can. And I don't want to bash the teachers. I mean, I know a lot of teachers who are frustrated with Common Core. I've talked with them. But this isn't the way to go. We need standards. There's no doubt we need standards, but Common Core really is the control. You could say it's the government control of education, and that's why it's bad.
And so, once if you were elected to the state house, who would you say should make the standards? The Department of Education, the State Department?
I believe that's kind of where it gets a little hairy for me. I believe that first of all, our state should be in control of making those standards. Is it the Department of Education or the Board of Education? Those are good areas to look at, and I think that would probably be the best route is to maybe look at the Board of Education at our state level and go from there. And not to mention, of course, we have an elected official, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and that's their platform. I mean, I'd like to hear ideas, of course, from those candidates that are running.
Okay, and I think you're about to get grilled here, and Duff is on the line. Good morning, Duff.
Morning, Donnie. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Grilled is such a grim term. I just had a couple of thoughts to throw into this whole discussion. Number one, everybody is saying that Common Core is no good, and the Common Core standards are no good, but I don't see them offering any alternatives. Number two, we've pretty much been on our own before, and you can see what happens. We aren't getting near the bang for our buck that we were before, so I think it's time to try something different. And that last statement about having the school boards and how they're going to take care of business so far, I've only been here since 1978, but all I see any of the school boards do is go out of state for solutions. I still have a hard time believing that in this great state of Wyoming we don't have enough mind power to come up with solutions right here in state.
I would definitely agree with your last statement, and your last statement says it all. It actually contradicts the first things you said, though. Basically stating, well, let's try something new. Well, what we have right now as far as Common Core state standards are something that was from out of state. It was developed by a far-left progressive organization called Achieve Incorporated. It was funded by the Gates Foundation. None of those organizations, really, with the exception of maybe Achieve, doesn't have anything to do with education. In fact, it was then endorsed by the National Governors Association and the Chief State Schools, some other trade organization, to make it sound like it was endorsed by the rest of the states. But those are trade organizations. So what we have is something that's developed by progressive left and was forced upon the several states. It was coerced in a rotten way. And these standards, again, they're from outside the state. I agree with you. I think that we have the willpower and the mind power here in Wyoming to come up with our own good standards. And I don't think that we need Common Core. I don't think we need something from outside of the state, some bureaucrat office in Washington somewhere telling Wyoming students and Wyoming teachers and Wyoming parents what we need to learn. I think we can decide that for ourselves.
Well, so far we haven't been doing a very good job of it.
Well, it's either that we have the willpower and the Wyoming people are smart enough, or we're not, and we're dumb, and we should follow like sheep with the federal government. And I just don't believe that second statement. I think that we're smart enough and we have the willpower and mind power to do it.
Okay, and thanks a lot, Duff. I do, and this is just I guess if we're in a situation where we are able to ditch these standards, we'd have to have some kind of replacement.
Oh, absolutely. You can't just go willy-nilly and we're just going to kind of go wherever the wind takes us. I mean, we have to have standards to shoot for. We have to have a construct of education. But what we have now is not a good construct. And I guess that's what I'm trying to point out, is Common Core is just more than state standards. It's a construct, and it's a failing construct, and a construct that does not promote excellence. It promotes mediocrity.
Well, and there's another set of standards that I always ask about anytime the education thing comes up. And okay, well, Duff, hang on a second though. I'll get to you in a second. But the next generation science standards, of course, the problem a lot of people have in Wyoming with those is the idea that's contained within the standards that coal-fired plants are responsible for climate change.
Sure, and that's just one problem. Again, we have other problems too. They promote evolution as fact when it's theory. It still hasn't been proven as fact, but that's how it's portrayed. Not only that, but it really, talking about these next generation science standards, it promotes controversial societal issues in a way that it normalizes them, I guess is the best way that I could describe them. And it's really, it's telling people what to think and how to think about things. And our children are most susceptible to that. So these kids go to school, and if they were under those standards, they're going to go home thinking that evolution is fact. They're going to go home, as far as some of these controversial societal issues, even some of the social issues that we're dealing with today, like gay marriage and things like that. They're going to go home thinking a certain way because that's what science is going to tell them. And they're going to go home thinking that CO2 is a pollutant, which I flat out disagree. I don't believe it's a pollutant, and I think this stuff that's going on, there's enough scientists out there, and of course we can almost say the silent majority, but they're not silent. They're rising up and saying, no, this is a bunch of garbage. As far as this thing of global warming and CO2 being a pollutant, and it's being pushed by, again, it's a progressive agenda, and there's a lot of money behind it.
Well, and the first thing I thought about when I saw the story with the next generation science standards is some kid going home, fourth, fifth grader going home and saying, "Daddy, you work at the coal plant. Why are you destroying the earth?" It just seems out of whack at least with the values of our state. I guess Duff's back with us. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
Well, I just figured you cut me off because I was creating controversy.
Oh no, controversy's all right as long as it's not too. We'll just say too rough.
Yeah. Now, anyhow, back to our previous conversation there. I offer up two examples of the state going it on their own, and it's real simple. Number one is YCAS. So we put people in charge that really knew what they were doing, and that spawned pause, and both of them have been dead on arrival, really, and they've been patching on them ever since. As far as the next generation science standards, whether you like it or not, they're already going to teach it in the school. And it ain't because it's mandated, it's because the science teachers have took the parts that they think are feasible, and they're going to go ahead and teach them.
There's going to be, well, you're making a broad assumption that all science teachers are going to be agreeable to that.
Science teachers that I'm talking about in Campbell County that I talk to on a regular basis, they're taking the next generation science standards, the parts that they think are good, they're going to go ahead and teach them.
Sure, but there again, there's some parts that they think are rotten, and it might be even some of those CO2 parts. I really don't know, but kind of answer your question a little bit as far as you talked about pause. With Common Core, we have so many different state standards. I was working with a kiddo in my organization, and went to a parent-teacher conference with him, and it was amazing, all of the different tests. And the scores, I had no idea what these scores meant, but there was probably 5 different scores that the teachers were reciting back to me. And my thought was, do you even have time to teach? It sounds like all you're doing is testing. And of course, in a private conversation with this teacher, that's kind of what her beef was too. Is boy, we've been mandated to do all these different things. There really isn't a lot of classroom time to even deviate. To help kids who are struggling in certain situations. We're teaching, and what we're doing is we're teaching to test, and that's not right. We send teachers to school to learn how to teach, not to teach to test.
You're up.
All righty. Well, anyhow, like I said, whether you like it or not, the next generation science standards are going to be taught in the schools.
Well, I don't think they are. I think I would disagree with you on that. But what I would say is, it kind of segues into another situation here, and that is, of course, our State Board of Education. And the ones who are going to create these standards more than likely are the ones who are going to give direction to that. And we have a State Board of Education. All of them are appointed by the governor. And there is a push still in Wyoming to make the Superintendent of Public Instruction an appointed position rather than an elected position. And something that I am egregiously against. This is a bad idea. And again, it takes away from local control. If we were to do that, Don, what would happen is the entire State Board of Education would be governor appointed. That one sole person, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, is the sole person that's, it's about local control again. That's the person that has to answer to the people of Wyoming as far as where the helm, or who's steering the helm of education is that person. And if the people of Wyoming don't like it, they have a voice in the matter. But if you take that away from them, really you're aggregating power to the governor. So it's a bad idea. But we still have people in the state legislature who say, they want to bring it to an amendment to the people. And really what we're asking the people to do, if we're going to do that, is we're saying we want you to vote away your rights. We want you to vote away your voice, and take away that part from the Constitution of Wyoming, and make that executive office 1 out of 5, make it an appointed position rather than an elected position. And I think that's a horrible idea.
Okay, and I think we'll wrap up the education stuff there. Why don't we take a short break, and we'll come back, and we'll get into a couple more things.
All right.
Okay, we'll be right back with Scott Clem, News Talk 1270 KIML.
We promise no more soccer talk until 2018. Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML. Call Don now, 682-1270. News Talk 1270 KIML.
News Talk 1270 KIML. Don Carpenter Show. Welcome back to the program. And if you're just joining us, we're talking with Scott Clem. He's running for House District 31. And in the last break, we did a good bit of education talk, but I wanted to touch on a few more issues, and we probably only have about 8 or 10 minutes left, so we'll have to kind of go through these kind of quickly. But the first one I wanted to ask, and of course this is probably first and foremost on the minds of a lot of people in this area, and that would be the energy industry, coal, oil. What would you do as a state representative to protect our energy industry?
Well, the first thing
I guess I should turn on your mic. There we go.
The first thing I would do is I would ask folks, and this is what I've asked folks, is who should be the ones to control Wyoming's natural resources and underground minerals? Should that be the state of Wyoming, or should that be Washington, some bureaucrats in Washington? And of course the answer comes back, well, Wyoming should. Well, that gets back to the public lands issue, and again, about local control. We have 48% of Wyoming that's federally owned, and not only that, but 19% of our underground minerals beyond that are claimed by the federal government. So here in our Powder River Basin, the federal government claims ownership of those resources. So the mineral royalties that are collected don't go to the state of Wyoming, at least not directly. They go to Washington. And then Washington gives us the leftovers, which may be about half. So first of all, I think that Wyoming needs to band together with the western states in declaring that we want the federal government to keep its promise that at statehood our public lands be turned over to the state. And I think that's priority number one. Wyoming, it's interesting. I was just hearing about this a little while ago. Up over by Sheridan, they're developing another coal mine, and I'm not sure if it's Cloud Peak that owns that or what that is. but that coal mine is on state land. And so all of the mineral royalty funds, all of the taxes, it's going to go directly into state coffers. And I believe that's the way that it should be. But as it is now, the coal that we produce in our region, the profits of course go into the company's hands, but the mineral royalty funds and the taxes, they go to the federal government first. So I think we need a course correction. I think we need to do right by Wyoming and do right by our state. We're being robbed by the federal government, and that's what it boils down to.
And of course, the second part of that is the EPA and how to deal with the EPA. And I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but I mean, what could the legislature do to deal with the EPA?
Well, the thing about it, the EPA is doing a lot of overreach. The scary thing, what they're trying to do now is they're trying to control waterways, and of course that pits an interesting conflict in Wyoming because in our Constitution, water is owned by the state. They own the water rights, and now the EPA is trying to claim the water rights, especially along our banks and streams and things like that. But aside from that, when we deal with this public lands issue, we'll see a lot of the EPA go away. They have more power in the West strictly because the federal government claims more ownership of public lands in the West. They don't have the pull that they do. They don't have the pull back east as they do in Western states. So when we deal with this issue in Wyoming, when we put our voices together and we put our feet down and say we're not going to stand for this any longer, then we can fight the EPA in that way as well.
Okay, and another kind of pet issue for me, and I try to ask this, when I have candidates in, and when it's an appropriate candidate. Obviously, I wouldn't ask a superintendent of public instruction about this issue, but the Second Amendment, and now Wyoming has a pretty good history of honoring the Second Amendment, and of course the Wyoming Constitution also has those rights as well. Is there anything farther that needs to be done, or you think we're in a pretty good place and you would just defend it? I mean, where do you stand on this?
I stand in the position that I believe, and this is kind of touching now, but who do we see these zones where guns aren't allowed? Who does that protect? Because you're not going to stop a criminally insane person who is hell-bent on hurting people. I mean, they're not going to see that sign and say, oh, I guess I'm not going to go ahead and carry my gun. There's a sign there that says I can't have a gun. So what you're basically doing is you're disarming people. And we've seen over and over and over again, especially in some of these recent school shootings. There's been one where there was, I can't remember what it was. There was a kid. He had a gun, but it was an armed security guard who just pointed their weapon at the kid, and the kid turned the weapon on himself, the weapon that he was carrying. So I believe that weapons are a deterrent, and I think what you do when you create a lot of these gun-free zones is you disarm innocent people. At the very least, I'm in support, especially of armed security or armed personnel, whether that's police officers. We have that here, even in Gillette. We have SRO officers that police our schools, and they have weapons that they can go ahead and use if need be. And I think that's at the very least, that's the correct course of action.
Well, so you're talking about gun-free zones in public areas, in schools and courthouses,
sure.
That kind of stuff.
And I guess, I mean, to go back, and we kind of zeroed in on something, but I mean, I am definitely a Second Amendment proponent. I believe that we have the right to own and carry weapons. I am totally in agreement with our current law, conceal and carry. That we don't have to apply to the state or anything like that. That Wyoming citizens have that right, and I think that's just and good.
Well, and I will say the constitutional carry, and I I was kind of I don't know if I was really shocked to see how many people carry around here. I mean, it was actually kind of fun for me to. It's kind of a game for me at this point. Go to Walmart and see how many people I see carrying. It really is. It's something I wasn't used to. Now you've lived here your entire life, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's correct.
So you're used to it.
You're
used to it.
It's something that I grew up with, and of course we teach gun safety out here. Our hunter safety courses are some of the best in the nation. I mean, you can carry your go to any state virtually, and you can use that hunter safety card. So we teach gun responsibility here, and I think that's good. We teach it in schools. It's important to us. It's a value that we hold dear. The ability to not only use our weapons to hunt, but also protect our homes and our families. So that's something that I would continue to fight for, and I would oppose anything that would deter from the Second Amendment use here in Wyoming.
Okay, and we only have a couple minutes left, but are there any other issues that you wanted to make sure that we talked about today?
We were talking about this briefly in the break. It's interesting what's going on in the border and how that might even affect Wyoming. Of course, we're a part-time legislature. It's hard for us to react to news. But we see the federal government, they're dumping immigrants in states. They're not enforcing the border, and we're having all of these children coming across the border. They're dying in the Rio Grande. I was just reading an article yesterday. There's dead children being washed up the shores on the Rio Grande.
I saw that story, yeah.
And so, what is Wyoming's role? Well, first of all, if this continues, hopefully in 6 months we don't have this issue any longer. But if it is, our U.S. government decides it's still not going to enforce the border, I believe it's Wyoming's responsibility to tell the federal government, no, we are not going to allow you to keep these kids in Wyoming, not at least until you enforce the border. But again, I don't know if that's something that we'll be approached with or not. It's hard, like I said, it's hard for us in our part-time legislature to really react to current issues as they happen like that.
Oh yeah, and I think that's something that the feds might want to they might try to take advantage of that as well. So it's something you have to be vigilant about at least.
That's correct.
So if anybody's interested in learning more about your campaign, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. You can call me directly. My phone number is 660-7141 if you have any questions. That's 660-7141. And then you can also find me on Facebook. It's really where I've been promoting things the most. You could go to facebook.com/Clem for House. That's CLEM for House. And I would encourage you to take a look, at least educate yourself in the issues. And if you have any questions, get a hold of me directly. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Scott Clem, for stopping by again. House District 31, facebook.com/Clem for House. If you want any more information, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again sometime soon. All right, thanks. And with that, we're going to take a short break. I'll come back and wrap things up before we do some sports. News Talk 1270 KIML.
The #1 talk show in Northeast Wyoming. Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML.